In this video, I'm going to walk through exactly how to sign 30 new clients per month in your ATL coaching business. And I can do this video because number one, we're doing it ourselves. And also, this is the same processes that we implement for all of our clients and we do this on a daily basis. So with that being said, let me just jump straight into it. So the first thing that I want to walk through is the math to get 30 new clients per month. Because once you understand the math of your funnel, of your acquisition process, you then understand the inputs required to get the output. And again, in this case, the output is 30 new clients. So in order to understand how to do that, we need to know the inputs required. And the way that we understand what inputs are required is to first understand the math. So if you're watching this video and you're a coach or you're an agency owner, your acquisition process is probably one of two core funnels, right? You've either probably got ads or you've got outbound, or you might have both, right? So let's start with the math of your ads funnel. Now with the ads funnel, you've got really three core metrics, okay? You've got your cost per book call, all right? You've got your close rate percentage, and then finally you have your CPA, which really stems from understanding your cost per call as well as your CPA, okay? Oh, sorry, your close rate. Okay, so let's assume, right? Let's be very conservative with our numbers. Let's assume right now you're paying $250 cost per call, which actually is quite high. We typically see across our clients anywhere between $50 and $150 cost per book call. But let's be conservative and say you've got a $250 cost per book call. And let's say your close rate is not that great and you're only closing at 25%, okay? Well, with those metrics, that will give you a 1K CPA. Now, since you know what our CPA is, it's now very easy to be able to sign 30 clients in a month because simply all you need to do is do your target new clients, which in our case is 30. Really here, you can input any number that you want. 30 just looks good for, YouTube, right? So you want to times your ideal clients by your CPA, which in this case is 1K. And then simply that gives you the ad spend that you need to spend in order to get your desired outcome of 30 new clients. And in this case, with a 1K CPA, that gives us 30K ad spend that we need to put into ads for that specific month. Okay. Now I understand you're probably watching this video thinking, well, that's very simple from a math perspective, but how do I actually do that? I'm going to get into the specifics here in a minute, but for now, just know that that is what's required. Okay, cool. So let's quickly look at the outbound funnel from a math perspective. So let's say again, with the outbound funnel, you've got a couple core metrics as well that you need to be tracking. Number one is your meeting set rate. Okay, so your meeting set percentage. Number two is, again, your close rate. And then finally, you want to look at your total emails per new client. So what does this reference? Total emails per new client. Well, all it means is how many emails do you need to send to get a client, right? Most people that outbound track how many emails do I need to send to get a meeting? But you also want to track how many emails do I need to send to get a client, okay? So again, let's do some basic numbers. If, for example, your meeting set rate was 1%, and again, your close rate, let's assume, was 25%. And so what these numbers here mean is that in order to get a new client, you need to send 400 emails. And as long as you maintain your 1% set rate and you maintain a 25% close rate, if you send 400 emails, that'll equal 4 booked calls. And out of the 4 booked calls, if you close 25%, you're going to sign a new client. Now, obviously, you can get nitpicky here and start to factor in your, your no-show rates and your show-out rate and how many people cancel, et cetera, qualified calls, et cetera. But for the sake of this video, we'll just keep it nice and simple and say that this is how many emails you need to send in order to get a new client. Now, with, again, our goal here of getting 30 new clients in a month, all we now need to do is, again, times this number, which is 400 emails, because essentially 400 emails equals one client. So we times that by however many clients that we want, which, again, in our case is 30. And so then this gives you 12,000 emails that you need to send. So if you send 12,000 emails, you maintain a 1% meet and set rate, and you maintain your 25% close rate, you're going to sign your 30 new clients, okay? That part there is the math. And again, you probably look at this and think that's super simple, it's super basic, but how do I actually do this? Again, I'm going to get into the specifics here in a minute on how to actually implement this and get these results. However, implement this for your own funnel, right? Look at the math of your own funnel because I can't tell you how many times I look at somebody's like funnel or their metrics or whatever it may be, and they're getting like a 2% meet and book rate on their outbound emails, for example, or they're paying $500 to get a new client, and they're like, how do I scale? Like, what do I do next? How do I get this better? How do I go from a 2% book rate to a 3% book rate? How do I go from a 500 CPA to a 250 CPA? I'm just like, look at the math of your funnel. Like, it makes sense. You're getting a really good meeting set rate. You've got really no core constraints right now. Your CPA is solid. You just got to put more in. The inputs, you just need to ramp up your inputs. And by the very nature of you ramping up your inputs, the output's going to increase. Now, I will say there is a fine line with this because you don't want to get delusional, right? Like if your close rate was 5%, for example, or your CPA was like 5K on a 2K product, obviously, you don't want to just keep spending more because that is a constraint, right? Your CPA is way too high. So then the question becomes, why is the CPA so high? Or why is your meeting set rate on your emails only 0.2%, right? Why is that? Because the CPA and the meeting set rate is the outcome, right? That's not the root problem. Okay. The root problem is somewhere deeper in the funnel. So for example, maybe your close rate is 5%. And so that's making your CPA 5K, for example, or 10K, or whatever the number is, right? You get the point. Okay, cool. The close rate then, if that's 5%, that's the constraint. That's what we need to fix. So now what we need to do, once you understand the math of the funnel, is we now need to play the game of identifying constraints and alleviating the constraints. So let's have a look at a few, right? I can't go through every single potential constraint in this video. However, let me walk through, some of the biggest problems I see with people's ad funnels and their outbound email funnels, and let me walk you through some potential solutions for you to fix that. Okay. So let's say, for example, your cost per book call right now, which I think is very common, is too high. Okay. So let's say, for example, your cost per book call, okay, equals, let's say, it's $1,000. Okay. It's just way too high. Well, this is the constraint of your funnel, because by extension of that, even if you're closing at 25%, that still means your CPA is going to be 4K. Now, if your back-end offer makes sense, if your back-end offer, one of our clients right now is charging 10K a month, right? So if his CPA is 4K, it's actually slightly less than that. But if it was 4K, it's not the end of the world. It's still pretty good, right? It's 2X on day one. His lifetime, he signs clients on for 6-month minimum contracts, so that's 60K. Like, it makes sense, right? But let's say this was your situation. How do we decrease your cost per book call? Well, there's a few core things I'll say, right? Which is, number one, your offer. This is probably going to be this is going to have the biggest impact. And here, let me just tell you a very quick story of how this can actually impact it. So I was reading a book. I forget the name of the book. I will say it was by Scott Haynes though. And he gave this story. He was like, here's the importance of your offer. If you had like a lottery ticket for your neighbor, for example, and you scanned that lottery ticket and it won, right? It won $100 million. It does not matter how you tell your neighbor, they will be ecstatic. They're going to be the most happy, excited people on the planet. Okay. It doesn't matter how you tell them. Okay. So it doesn't matter if you show them an ad. It doesn't matter if you knock on their door and tell them. It doesn't matter if you call them up. It doesn't matter if you send them an email. Like, it does not matter how you deliver that information. They're going to be over the moon, right? On the flip side, let's say, for example, that same lottery ticket didn't win $100 million. However, it won a lifetime supply of bin bags. Okay. Again, it does not matter how you present that information to your prospect, whether it be through, to your neighbor in this case, whether it be through a call, an email, whatever it is, knock on their door. Doesn't matter how you present that to them. They are not gonna be interested. They're not gonna care about it, right? And it doesn't matter how you deliver it to them. So my point is that with your offer, if at the end of the day, your offer is not good, you could have the best copy in the world, you could have the best creative in the world, you could have the best funnel in the world, but if the core crux of your offer is just something that your market doesn't care for, it's something that doesn't tie into your market's pre-existing desire, they are not going to care about it. So this is the biggest thing, is your offer. Now, sometimes I do see clients and they've got amazing offers, yet they're still not getting the results. So what are some other things that can help drive down your cost per book call? Well, I'll say, must admit, your audience is a huge part, okay? So we had one client where, I didn't spell audience correctly there, but anyway, we had one client where the offer was amazing, but the problem was the offer wasn't getting shown to exactly who the offer was created for. It was a different type of audience, right? And so what we did instead is we created a lookalike audience on a lead list of 1,000 leads that matched exactly who my client's ideal client was. And we uploaded that into Facebook, did a lookalike on it, and instantly, literally the day we launched those new ads, I swear to God, that day we booked in 3 calls, and ever since then we've booked in 2 to 3 calls consistently every single day. All we changed was the audience. The offer was the same. So again, if you've got an amazing offer, that's great, but if it's not getting shown to who the offer is actually specifically built for, it's not going to work, okay? Or I would say the other big one is, well, you can say copy, I would say. And then the final one is the funnel. So I highly recommend, and by the way, guys, if you want to know more about each one of these things, I've got videos all over this channel going through each specific one in deep detail. But for your funnel, I highly recommend a VSL, and I call this an offer lead VSL, which essentially refers to the offer. Because at the end of the day, if your offer is good enough, you should just be able to state your offer on its own, and that should garner attention. So then when you add that into a VSL that's structured amazingly well, you add it into really compelling copy and that type of stuff, that's where then this right here starts to decrease. Does that make sense? So these are the biggest things that I would say impact your cost per book call, okay? Now, what if your CPA, okay, is way too high on your ad? So your CPA / your ROAS. So you're losing money on your ads, or you're like just breaking even, okay? What would you do in that instance? What, if this was the constraint and this is stopping you from scaling, what impacts this? Well, I will say, number one is your cost per book call makes up your CPA, okay? Or it's part of it. And then the second part of it is your close rate percentage, okay? So again, your KPI for this should be anywhere between $50 to $150. This is what we see consistently across all of our clients. And bear in mind, all of our clients are spread across so many different industries, right? So we see consistently 50 to 150 is the KPI for cost per book call. Your close rate should be above 25%. So I promise you, if your CPA, right? If your CPA is way too high, then one of these two metrics, cost per call or your close rate, is going to be out of KPI. Either your close rate is going to be below 25% or your cost per call is going to be above 150. Now, I will say again, if you're in those KPIs, so your close rate's 30%, your cost per call is $75, but because of the price of your offer or the way your offer is structured, the CPA is still too high, then I would not be going to your market. You've not got a marketing problem at that point. You got a back end office problem at that point, meaning you're not charging enough for whatever it is that you're offering. And that's all that comes down to. Then you need to go into the back end and look at increasing your prices or figuring out, if for example, you have an agency and you've got a 2K per month offer and your CPA is 2K, I mean, that's not the end of the world. Could it be better? Yes, it could. But if your CPA is 2K and you've got a 2K per month offer, it's not that bad. Break even on day one. It's not the worst thing in the world. But if you're losing money, that means that people aren't staying. So then you've got a fulfillment problem, not a front end marketing problem. Does that make sense? So again, we're just trying to find the constraint. That's all this comes down to, right? That's primarily it for ads. For outbound, okay, it's actually quite similar. So for outbound, if your meeting set rate is the constraint, right? Meaning it is sub 1%. How do we increase your meeting set rate? Well, there's a few things, but again, it's going to come down to your offer for sure, and also your messaging, okay? And then you can also look at other things like outside factors such as like content, even your funnel potentially. If if you're like linking your CTA in your emails is like going to a VSL funnel or something, maybe that could be the constraint. But then you would want to look deeper into it as like, well, what's my click rate? Are people even clicking the email? No one's clicking the email. Well, the problem isn't the VSL because no one's even seen that. The problem is the email copy itself, right? And you've also got actually, your open rates as well. So you need to look at your open rates and think, okay, your open rate should ideally be above 70%. That's on outbound. You should be above 70% with your open rates. So again, if your open rate's like 30%, like something terrible, and your meeting set rate is 0.5%, then the problem might not actually be your emails. The problem is no one's opening the emails. So then we need to look at your subject line. Then we need to look at your email deliverability and ensure that that's all in check, right? Which is kind of like the two sub parts of your open rates is your subject line, okay? And then also your deliverability, right? And then the biggest thing I would say, honestly, with email outreach, as long as your open rates are in check, right? The biggest thing I will say is the messaging, for sure. Especially if you're in saturated niches. If you run an e-com agency right now and you do email outreach and you say, hey, we'll run your Facebook ads, we'll scale your store to whatever, you're never going to get any results with that type of messaging because every single person in the e-commerce industry is sending the same emails, and every prospect that you reach out to is getting at least, literally at least 15 to 20 emails a day, I would say, from other agencies saying the exact same thing that you're saying. Okay, and this is not just for the e-com agency space in particular. This is for any space that's saturated, okay? And so the biggest way, or the easiest way, I should say, to differentiate yourself from everybody else is your messaging. And you might argue, well, why don't I just make a better offer than everyone else? You can, for sure. But the problem is that with saturated industries, most offers have already been made. That's the problem. And you can't just keep pushing that boat out further and further and further. The reason being is because if you keep pushing that boat out further and further in terms of the offer that you're making, the claim, the promise, the guarantee that you're making, the problem is that you get to a point where you cross the threshold of believability, meaning there's a line. In every industry, there's a line to where if you promise over that line or you guarantee over that line, whatever it is, no one will believe you. Okay, if I came to you and said, I'll guarantee you $1 million per month tomorrow, are you going to believe me? No, you're not. So even though that offer sounds crazy, $1 million per month guaranteed, like you're not going to believe me. So you're not going to, you're not going to take action on it. It's not going to hook you in, right? So the problem is, as I say, with saturated industries, everybody's already pushed the boat out to as far as it can go. So now you can't differentiate on your offer. You can't promise something bigger than the next person because they're already promising it, right? So then you need to differentiate yourself on the messaging. Does that make sense? And again, the close rate is going to be the same thing as I mentioned here, okay? Which is, if your meeting set rate is, above 1%, right? So it's above 1%, your meeting set rate, but you're still not getting, you've got to send like 5,000 emails to close a prospect. Then I'll guarantee you that your close rate is going to sub 25%. And if it is, then we need to look at what the problem is on the phone. Okay. And the easiest way for me to look at a client's close rate and see, if their close rate is 10%, for example, when they first come on board with us, the easiest way for me to see what the problem is to ask them why are people not closing? So you should ask yourself this question. Why are people not closing? If if people aren't closing because they say, oh, this is something I've tried before, then the problem is your pitch, because the pitch should differentiate your offer from everybody else, and the pitch should prove why what you're doing is exponentially better than every other option in the market, right? You want to be perceived as different and superior to everything else in the market. So if you're getting a lot of prospects say to you right now, oh, I've tried this in the past, it didn't work. Oh, I've tried another agency, it didn't work. Oh, I've joined another coaching program, it didn't work. Well, the problem is your pitch, because the way you're presenting what you have is being perceived as the same as everything else in the industry. That's the problem. Okay, what about if you got the objection of it's too much? Well, if you get the objection of it's too much, then again, I would actually probably say part of it could potentially be your pitch, because you're not making it be perceived as valuable enough, right? So then any amount of money is going to be too much, because if somebody perceives something as zero value, anything above zero is going to be way too much, right? Because the only point that somebody buys is when the value exceeds the cost, as everybody knows, right? So that could be the problem. Another problem could be that the financial objection that you're getting of it's too much is actually a smokescreen for a deeper problem. Most of the time, that deeper problem is actually a lack of believability in what it is that you're saying. Meaning, the point that a prospect buys your product is, as I said before, when they see the value exceeds the price. But also, it's when they 100% believe in their deepest heart that they can get the result that you're promising. If they cannot see themselves getting the result that you're promising, they won't buy. Okay. And they might not tell you that. That's the problem. They might not come out outright and say, hey, I don't think I can get this result, so I'm not going to buy. But what will they say? Oh, it's too much. Oh, I need to think about it. Or, they'll give you a smoke screen, but that's not the actual problem. Okay, and there's a bunch of tactics and ways to figure that out in terms of how to, identify the real problem and whatnot, which I'm not going to get into in this video, but you see where I'm going with it, right? So then what do you need to do is you need to look at, okay, what are they uncertain about? And you need to figure out what specifically they're uncertain about. And then that then becomes the real problem that you actually then go ahead and fix. For example, if they're uncertain about, it could even be the same thing. They're like, oh, I don't see myself getting this result because I've tried this before, then that goes back to your pitch, right? So hopefully this makes sense in terms of how I look at things. This is the exact process we implement for all of our clients. Like anytime a client comes on board, most of the time the problem is lack of sales calls initially, right? That's always the problem, is a lack of sales calls. And so what do? We get ads up, we start running their ads, and we solve that problem of lack of sales calls. But then we look at the next constraint in the process, and most of the time the next constraint is actually the sales. So then we switch our focus to increasing their sales call conversion rate, their sales process overall, right? And so that's what you need to be doing when you're looking at your acquisition. If you're not getting the results that you want, again, if you're not seeing these numbers, right, you're not able to spend 30K and maintain a 1K CPA. Well, the reason is because there's a constraint somewhere in your funnel, somewhere. Something's not working. And if you find that, then each constraint or each metric within your acquisition process, if, again, the meeting set rate isn't where it wants to be, or the cost per call isn't, or the close rate, each metric within your funnel, there's then a list of potential solutions to fix that constraint that's tied to that specific problem. So again, if your close rate is at 5%, then there's a specific set of problems that you want to implement to increase your close rate. If your cost per call is not where you want it to be, there's a specific set of problems to increase your cost per book call. And I've kind of gone through a few of them there. Obviously, I can't go through every single minute one because that will be a 3-hour video, but hopefully this explanation helps and makes sense. And, you start to look at your acquisition. This is the other big thing I'll finish on this point, which is, you want to start to look at your acquisition from the point of view of, your actual business overall, not, especially if you're running ads, you don't want to look at it from a media buying perspective. So you want to look at your big numbers, right? Again, cost per call, close rate, CPA. And if those things are in place, those things are in check, you got to just keep scaling. And if they're not in check, that's then when you go deeper, right? So for example, if one of our clients had a 1K CPA and their offer's 10K, I don't care what their cost per click is, what their cost per lead is, what their cost per call is even. I don't care, because their CPA is 1K, their offer's 10K, they're at a 10x ROAS. Let's keep scaling until the CPA starts to break and the CPA comes 2K or maybe 3K or a little bit less or whatever it is. The CPA starts to break. Then I'm going to go, okay, why is this increased? Our close rate's the same, but our cost per book call has increased. Okay, why is our cost per book call has increased? Let's go to look at the cost per click. Let's look at the cost per lead. Let's look at the CPM. Let's look at our opt-in rate, right? Let's look at all of these metrics. Let's look at our lead to call conversion. What is that? Has that dropped? Has that moved? Yes, that's dropped. Why is that dropped? Oh, we changed out the VSL. Let's change back the VSL. You know what I mean? Like, you just want to go through and look at everything that is tied to getting that specific metric. And then once you look at those things, you then be able to say, oh, our VSL is not converting. Cool. Let's fix the VSL. It's as simple as that. So hopefully that helped. If you enjoyed the video, like it. If you didn't, dislike it, do what you got to do. But hopefully you found value in this. If you're an agency or a coach or above 25K a month, you want us to guarantee you 90 qualified sales calls per month for your agency or coaching business. We do this completely done for you. We run your ads. We do everything done for you. If you're interested in that, click the link in the description and book in a call. And with that being said, hopefully you found value in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.